All right. Okay, so I'll get started on just a little introduction right now. Can everybody hear me okay? Can I see maybe some, all right, some thumbs up? I'm actually in the mountains on a short vacation and I was looking for the best Wi-Fi spot. So I will try to, hopefully if there's no issues, but I give Great Lakes Jet Alumni Association members, if you are like, stop talking or we can't hear you, just interrupt me and say that. So I am really excited to be here. The Great Lakes Jet Alumni Association is a fantastic organization. I've been watching your progress over the last many years. I was not on the JET program myself, but I am a fan of JET. So I think everybody here on this, all the attendees, you're really going to get a lot out of this webinar, and also definitely take a look at the Great Lakes Jet Alumni Association website so you can see what else they have. And yeah, I think there's just a lot you can learn from them about. So I will get started. And first, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and I'd like for you to answer in the chat. And first of all, I'd like to know who is joining. If you're in high school, write high school. If you're college, write college. If you're a recent grad, if you have been working for a few years, college. Yes, college. I see a lot of college. Awesome. Sophomore, good. Working, awesome. Working after college, perfect. Fantastic. Working for 10 years, recent grad, beautiful. Just ended a shift. Oh, you must be so tired. Working, college, okay. Oh, beautiful. Thank you, everybody. So this will definitely help me with the content I'm going to share. But I really believe that the things I'm going to share today are helpful for you, whether you are in high school, college, or even working for many years. I believe that networking in general is extremely important for a job search. And a lot of people say it's probably one of the most important things, in addition, of course, to having a good resume, which we'll talk about in the later part of this presentation. But I think networking and knowing how to do it, but also practicing, is extremely important. So now I'm going to ask you a second question. Yes, exactly. Networking is number one for better or worse, so which is perfect for my next question. If you could answer in the chat, are you a shy person? Are you outgoing? Are you both? Kind of tell me what your personalities are like. Definitely shy. Okay, somewhere in the middle, both shy. Good, shy, very, very shy. Oh, both outgoing. Perfect. Both most likely. All right. Very outgoing. Oh, yes. Hi. Outgoing, both. Shy, social. Okay. Oh, fantastic. Both used to be shy. All right. Shy but friendly. Oh, yes. This is great feedback. I will be using the words outgoing, or actually I'll be using introvert and extrovert in my presentation. But an introvert, people may think that that means shy, that you don't like to talk to people. But actually, introvert, I think, would be more like it's just harder to be out in public with lots of people because it kind of drains your energy. And if you're extroverted, you're with people because you get energy from them. So people use these phrases to make it seem like they're shy. Like if they say introverted, they assume it's shy. Or if they say extroverted, they assume it's super active. So we're going to kind of talk about those definitions, but I'll share that I am super introverted, but I love to talk with people. So like today, right now, I'm so excited to be here. But when I'm done, I'll probably be like, oh, I have to recharge my batteries. But I'm not shy about talking with everybody. So we'll kind of get into that, and I will give you tips regardless of where you are on that scale. So we're going to start my presentation, and I will give me just a second. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this will be fine with the internet. So please forgive me again if it's troubled. Okay. All right. Does everybody see my screen? Yes, thank you for the thumbs up. All right. So today we're going to talk about how to network for a Japanese speaking career. Now, you've probably heard about networking in general, right? There are so many things we can talk about, the basics of networking, but today we're going to focus on how you can do it with regards to Japanese language or with Japanese people or in the Japanese American or your country community. And it'll give you kind of more in-depth knowledge. So first of all, I will give you a short introduction for myself. My name is Kasia. I'm from the Michigan area, so I did consider the JET program with the Great Lakes JET Alumni Association, but I did a different program called MEXT, the Monbusho Scholarship. And I lived in Japan for a total of 8 years, absolutely fell in love with Japan. And I have been using Japanese in my day-to-day business and fun life since 1992. So it's been a very long time. I have a company called Ikigai Connections, and I try to help people. I think of my younger self when I was looking for a job to use my Japanese language skills. I'm just going to give feedback that I use. I wish I had known when I was looking for a Japanese job. I have a job board and just lots of blog posts, great articles from guest people who've written about their time in Japan. So if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer. So, all right. So as I mentioned, the basics of networking, I believe, can be broken into two forms: online networking and in-person networking. Now, online networking got kind of bigger during the pandemic because we weren't leaving the house. We were trying to do events online. And in-person networking is probably the one that's really hard for people who are shy, just don't know how to act in public. It just makes them sweat like crazy. So the details, I talked about this in a really good webinar with the US-Japan Bridging Foundation. So if anybody wants the basics of networking in general, this is the website. You can go to ikigaiconnections.com/bridging. There I talk about networking basics, which we're not really going to go into in this webinar, but I still, this is a good basic, if you're just like new to the topic. So please take a look there if you'd like. And today we're going to start, before I get into the networking specifics, I'm going to talk about what kind of Japanese jobs are even out there. And a lot of people ask me because they cannot believe that they can use their Japanese language and or cultural skills in a job. And I say that this is a global economy. Practically in any country you can imagine, there's going to be some connection with Japan because Japan has business all over the world. And also any industry. I really believe that any industry that deals with Japanese customers or has Japanese employees or has a location in Japan or a headquarters in Japan, there's really any kind of job out there. So whether you are interested in if you're interested in engineering, if you are into drama and art, if you're into really anything that your heart desires, I 100% believe that there is some kind of Japan connection. And if there is no Japan connection, if you Google your heart out and you cannot find a darn thing out there, then my answer is then start something. If you have an interest in it, you can always try something yourself. So that's the more entrepreneurial route. But I really believe that there are various opportunities out there. So if you are interested in a Japanese job, I'm going to talk very briefly here about language expectations. So a lot of people come to me saying, oh my gosh, I don't speak Japanese very good. Oh, I'm so nervous, I can't talk in public. Or when I start writing, my kanji doesn't come out. Or, oh, the kanji is a problem. I hear all sorts of things from people. But my reminder to everybody is that we weren't born with a language, any language. We learn it, right? You're not going to the example that people always use is you're not going to yell at a baby for not being able to walk, or a toddler when they're just growing and learning how to walk. You're going to encourage them. They're going to take baby steps and eventually they're going to start running. So it's the same thing with language, whether it's your own language or another one, or if I know people in Europe, they have like multiple languages, like 4 at a time, and they can speak with their neighboring countries. It's fantastic. So always be confident in your level and just know that if you want to learn and improve, you can get anywhere. So now, what kind of language expectations do jobs have? They're all over the place. Some companies will ask you just to have an understanding of the language culture or the Japanese culture. So if you've been on a study abroad, if you've been on the JET program, if you've been on any other program and you know how to live in Japan or use the public transportation or communicate with people in a store, even though you don't really know the language, just knowing about Japan is extremely valuable to some companies. Of course, there are some roles that they will expect you to have, fluent or amazing skills. And then there's some roles that I believe are advertised, maybe not necessarily mistakenly, but some job ads are out there expecting, fluent language requirements when in actuality, they just may need somebody who's intermediate or has 2 or 3 years of college Japanese and maybe just needs the opportunity to learn how to use the language skills. So this is a topic I absolutely love, but the main point is that there's all kinds of language expectations. I want you to be an advocate for yourself, that if you see a role that says fluent, I want you to sell your skills and say, hey, I lived in Japan for 3 years. Maybe I took the exam, JLPT, and I'm an N5, but I can do this, this, this. I want you to promote yourself and share with the companies what you can do. So, and in networking, it's also going to become important for you to be okay with the language level that you're at if you're going to be speaking to somebody. And we'll get to that a little bit later too. So regardless, I want you to feel confident, whatever level you have. So next, most people who study Japanese know this, but I'm going to emphasize it. Relationships are extremely important in Japan. It's not like, you're just gonna go to a room, throw out your business cards at people as they're walking in and just be like, hey, this is my name is Mike. My name is Mike. Here. Like that might be a little bit too much, like relationships. You need to start with no expectation that you're going to get something from it. You're not going to go to a networking event and expect to make a sale or something. You're going to go to a networking event because you want to meet people. You want to get to know their name, where they're from, what they like. And it's not about forcing one, right? You're going to develop it. You're going to nurture it. It takes a long time. Some people have no patience for that. So maybe the Japanese business relationships aren't for you, but if you want to be successful in Japan or in a Japanese job outside of Japan, I really believe relationships are important. So I also have on my blog posts, I have this series called Senpai Success Stories. And I really believe that hearing other people's stories is very helpful to you. So if you ever wanted to go to my website, ikigaiconnections.com, in the search, just look for Jessica, Georgia. Jessica she was networking from a very young age, even before the JET program. She did the JET program, came back, still networking. And many years later, not many, she's still extremely young and just such an amazing executive female in the Japan-US world. But she got her current role because she was networking years before. So you never know what can happen with the relationships that you build and the people that you meet without an expectation that they're going to give you something right away. Okay, it's all about, we're all human. We're all trying to do, our best. And I think working as a team, collaborating, understanding other people, whether they are important to you now or not, that's not what this is about. It's about being human in a relationship. So I think that's, I'll mention actually one more example. So, there's people who come to me and say, I'm trying to meet somebody in this industry, either for a job or for a business proposal, and they just send them a cold email, right? Sometimes a cold email won't really work because they're like, who is this person? I have no idea who this person is. That's why it's important to network, because you need to know people it's helpful to know people before you ask them a question in the future of, hey, are you interested in some business, or are you hiring? Hey, this is me. I met you 10 years ago or 2 years ago or whatever. So it's not about like a cold call or a cold email outreach. It's about starting slow, getting to know people's names, and then eventually in the future be like, oh, you know what? I heard that this company is hiring. hey, I know this person in the HR department. Maybe I'll send them my email and say, hey, do you remember meeting me at the Japan Festival? I'm still really into Japan. I'd love to send you my resume. Is that something I can apply? Blah, blah, blah. So I think that's extremely important to know. So moving along, next, we're going to talk about the various networking opportunities. So now I'm going to give you a bunch of ideas on where you can go and what you can possibly do, especially if you live in an area where you think that there's nothing Japan related. So I'm going to talk about the US. You can apply this to your country. You can apply this to being a non-native Japanese person in Japan, but my wording is going to be about in the US. So for us in the US, you can find native and non-native Japanese speakers or people who are involved and have the cultural knowledge working at Japanese companies. So here in Michigan, we have nearly 500 companies. Our consulate is shared with Ohio. Ohio has another 500 companies, and Great Lakes Jet Alumni Association is also representing Ohio. So find out where the Japanese companies are at. Don't forget also that there's a bunch of non-Japanese companies that deal with Japanese people too, Japanese customers, but let's just focus on just the Japanese companies. Find out where they are, find out what kind of events they may have. That's a great opportunity to find people who are involved. Next, figure out who are the hiring related decision makers. So if you're networking on LinkedIn, for example, and you see that there's somebody who's an HR manager at a Japanese company in your state, maybe that's somebody that you may want to follow, maybe see what kind of posts they have, and just, kind of see what they're talking about. Maybe they're going to mention something about hiring or maybe an event, but just kind of pay attention to those people that are involved in HR. The third bullet point, if you're involved in the US-Japan community, there's a lot of organizations or cultural events. So here in Michigan, we have the Japan Business Society of Detroit, Japan America Society. We've got local, lots of cultural groups related to like kendo and karate and tea ceremony. There's 2 different schools for tea ceremony here. We've got ikebana, like there's various organizations involved that you can find people from those organizations. If you just do a little bit of searching, maybe contact your local consulate. If you find your local consulate, you can see that they usually have external links and you can go there and see what other organizations are listed. Next, school and JET alumni. You can ask your teacher, your professors, maybe they know of some organizations they can share with you. Your JET alumni, fellow JET alumni, if you're interested in joining the JET program, maybe you start following the Great Lakes Jet Alumni Association or your organization in your state or country and just kind of see what they have. Maybe you can reach out with questions and find out what's going on there. And then anybody else who studies Japanese, whether it's at school, maybe it's a meetup. Here in Michigan, I think we have 3 different meetups that you can join. Some are online in Ann Arbor, some also in person. And there's one that meets in the Troy, Sterling Heights area. Just go and meet other people, and also Novi, I believe, too. Go and meet them and see, maybe they have some suggestions for you. Just watching the time here. All right. So, and again, if anybody has any questions on anything I'm mentioning here, please pop it into the chat. We'll answer them later. I don't see any chat comments right now, so I will take a look later. All right. So now online events started to get very popular during the pandemic. And the great thing about this is that a lot of like the Japan America societies, I believe there's 47 or 43 in the US. Forgive me, my numbers are always kind of off, but every local area that has Japanese companies in their area has a Japan America society. So find their websites, see what kind of events they may have to offer. And pre-pandemic, it was actually kind of difficult to be a part of a different Japan America society. But now, a lot of these organizations, they offer events that you can join from literally any state or country. It's just something that if you want to be a part of it, sure, they'll offer it to the public too. Where usually you'd have to pay a certain amount or be a member to join these things. Now there's just a lot that's happening. I mean, there's just too many events. So there's no excuse not to find an event online. You just have to do your research. Then there's a lot of Japanese business societies. They may be called something different. Ours is the JBSD. I know that there's organizations in different states that are just, and that could be both cultural and business. So just look in your area, I think there's just really a lot of information out there. There are some that are mostly written in Japanese. So if you have a higher level of Japanese, you may want to consider becoming a member of those. If they're in the US, they're usually open to people who understand the Japanese language. Maybe they're just a small group of, Japanese companies, and they just feel more comfortable speaking in Japanese. It's the same way if we were to be in Japan, we would probably want to find this, local American group where we can speak in English. So just if you have the courage to contact them, I'm a member of my JBSD and I love to get their emails whenever there's an event. The emails are mainly in Japanese, but that also kind of makes me want to study Nihongo some more, or see, in the email that comes in, oh, this event that's coming up, it's about this topic. Oh, let me read the rest of this information. And then I study my Japanese as I'm reading this too. So great opportunities to practice that as well. Next, there's a lot of Japan-related organizations. So in the US, we've got the Japan Foundation in LA, as well as New York. We've got US Japan Council, JEDA International, and there's just a lot of organizations that we have here. And I think that really any country has organizations. Just Google it, find it online, put in, US Japan organization and see what comes out, and visit those websites and see what they have to offer. Facebook, I think, is it's important, I believe, for learning about this, that a lot of Japanese organizations are on Facebook. I personally use LinkedIn more. And when it comes to learning about events, but there aren't as many on LinkedIn as there may be on Facebook. So maybe you can use both, or even Twitter, as well as, Instagram, TikTok probably now too. So just maybe find your preferred social media, see what they have, and then maybe check out Facebook some more, because there's a lot of Facebook pages out there you can follow. You can learn about events, a lot of groups out there available too. I think that Facebook is more used by Japanese people than LinkedIn, for example. So for LinkedIn, for me, I personally find it helpful to find people who are involved in the US-Japan world that communicate in English. So those are the people that I also want to reach out to. So I'm more heavily active there, but really a lot of social media have plenty of information out there for you to find any events you can possibly imagine. So now let's talk a little bit about in-person events. So same kind of research as what I just mentioned regarding the online ones, but it's the focus on local. So something you can travel to. So I already mentioned a couple of examples from Michigan. So the first one is the Japan America Society. It's a great organization that has a lot of cultural events. I have signed up for an individual membership. Some of these organizations offer student memberships too. And so you can just join and see. Some have young professional groups that I'm also helping out with here in our local area. So in the past, pre-pandemic, we had things like we went to a sushi place to learn how to make sushi in downtown Ann Arbor, which was so much fun. The chef came and showed us, and then we got to eat what we made. So a lot of these like small groups that you can join, and it's really a lot of fun. The JBSD, you can also join as an individual member if you have a little bit extra cash for that, and then you're aware of events that happen. You can go visit these organizations and any events that they run. So for example, our Japan Festival just happened a couple weeks ago in October, and it was a great way to just go and check out. So there were a lot of, there was tea ceremony showing, there was some ikebana hanging out, there were some origami tables, and just a lot of things you could go see. There was an entire show in the auditorium where you could see all kinds of Japan related, like martial arts and dancing and stuff. So these kinds of events, they happen in so many locations for free. Typically, you can go there, you can see, learn about the culture, meet people, and it can be maybe nerve-wracking at first, but go with a friend, maybe it'll be a little bit easier for you. Also, we had something called the Hina Matsuri in March, and that was happening at our local Detroit Institute of Arts. We'll see if it's going to happen next year, but these kinds of festivals and events are just such great places to go and meet other people. And lastly, this is something where I feel provides a lot of value to you in your job search, and it is volunteering. If you find any of these organizations in your local area, reach out to them, see if you can volunteer. Maybe like the Japan Festival is just a one-day event for 4 or 5 hours. They're always looking for people to help them out with maybe passing out flyers or just helping set up tables. And by doing that, you only spend a few hours, but you get to meet the people who are running this organization. And then you get to find out things that help you. Maybe you can ask them, you get to know them a little better and be like, oh, I'm actually a senior and I'm graduating soon and from college, and I'd like to know about this and about that. And you never know who could help you with any question that you may have. So as a volunteer, you are providing value. And then I believe that there's a reciprocal relationship happening and people will also want to help you out because you're helping them out. So definitely consider volunteering opportunities. All right, now I was just checking the time. We're going to get into some action steps. So I'm going to give you a bunch of tips now. And maybe if it's really overwhelming to you, I want you to pick just one. And then at the end, I'm going to finish my slides and I'm going to give you an example of something that I just did on Thursday with specific, like real specific nitty-gritty things that I did to maybe help you out and give you a final sample of what you can do. And then we'll be opening up for questions. All right, we're still good on time. Awesome. So the first thing is, I just told you about all these organizations. There's like 40 some Japan American societies, Japan business societies, related organizations. Find them, sign up for their newsletters, get the information in your inbox if you are using email frequently. But also in their newsletters, you get like a summary of what they're up to. So I am signed up for probably every single Japan American society, and I know how many online events there are happening. I'll see a topic that comes up and I'll be like, oh, I could check this one out in LA and see, maybe learn about baseball or something. I once went to an event I happened to be in Texas traveling, and I went to the Japan American Society there because they had a baseball related event. And I know zero about baseball, but I still went. I learned, I had a great time. I learned and heard people singing these chants in Japanese that they were trying to share with their local members. And it was a fun time. So if you sign up for newsletters, you will see a lot of things that you may miss on social media. And you'll see some of these organizations, like I said, they offer long distance, maybe like $40 for a year just to help be an online member. And it's just nice to know what's happening in the world with regards to the US, Japan, and again, any other country, just fill in the blank. So the next idea I have is to follow these organizations on social and interact with them. So first step, just follow them. But second step is stay in touch, stay top of mind. And if you like respond to them and say, oh, I can't wait for this, or if you share an event that they're doing with your friends, or if it's on LinkedIn, share it to your feed and have others know what's happening in your area. Like there's just a lot of things you can do to become kind of like a cheerleader from the side and cheer on these organizations, help support them, because a lot of these organizations are nonprofits. So they rely on the interest of people. So if there's something that they're organizing that is interesting to you, it'd be helpful to share with others too and see. There's also organizations that may not necessarily be super famous, like Japan American Society, because that's under an umbrella, but there's like a local organization that maybe, I know in New York, there's an organization that can share about events, and you just follow their newsletter, and there's a lot of things out there. Google it will be your best friend for this. So interacting with them also has these organizers see, oh, wow, Joe-san wants to interact with us, and that leads to joining or volunteering for these organizations. So they may be like, hey, call out for volunteers for our October festival. Please reach out and let us know if you can help us. That's a great way to network too, and it's almost easier because you're going there to volunteer, right? You're not expected to really talk just yet, but they'll be like, oh, Joe-san, irashai, dozo. And then they'll instruct you on what to do. And you just kind of ease into things without necessarily having to talk too much. So it's really good for shy people, I think. So definitely give it a try if you can. And also you can learn something new. Now this one, I know not everybody has business cards. Meishi are business cards. And maybe if you're studying in college, some of you may have taken a business Japanese course and maybe you've practiced giving the business card. Don't worry too much about the rules regarding business cards. I just think the most important thing is to have some with you. So they're really not that expensive. You can get a box of 100 for like $20 maybe. maybe a smaller, just go to your local Office Depot, get some business cards made with your name, your email, and maybe a little word about you, student at University of Michigan, for example, or JET program, Hokkaido, what year, things like that. Just a little bit of, it doesn't have to be super fancy. Get those done and have them with you. Always carry like 5 in your wallet if you can, in case you run into somebody and you have an impromptu networking event or an impromptu networking opportunity. You can bust out your meishi and you can show something, because you want to be memorable. You want them to have something of you, because they may go, if they don't have a meishi, and they'll go home or to the office and they might forget that, oh, what was their name again? Oh, darn. And they may look for you on Facebook or LinkedIn, but they may not have something to remember. You give them that meishi, they'll have it. And they'll be like, oh, I met this really interesting daigaku 3年生, and they're so interested in Japan. And you know what? Maybe I've got an internship opportunity just for them. So you never know what could happen. So always have a meishi with you. And if you go to an event, whether it's like the Great Lakes Jet Alumni Association job fair, if there's going to be in-person ones, or wherever you go, if it's a bigger event, have as many as you can carry, just in case you run into a lot of people and you happen to pass it out to a lot. You're on a roll and you pass out like 30 of them, right? Have your meishi ready. Very important. Now, practice speaking your Nihongo. I think this is very nerve-wracking, and some people who are shy just would much prefer to have a book or email and just hide behind the computer screen. And I get that. But I think that if you're able to just try to speak a little bit more at these events, these hopefully comfortable events, or, volunteering for a local organization, if you just try to start off with saying something in Japanese, I really think it'll be helpful. So, for example, when I was in Japan, I would say like one word, and around me, I had like my cheerleading squad. They were like, yeah, sugoi, your Japanese is so good. I'm like, I just said thank you, but thank you. And then I got more courage to speak more and more and more. And you may not have that kind of like supportive host family or people right by you as you're speaking or trying to talk to somebody at an event, but still try to practice like, hajimemashite, Kasia desu, douzo yoroshiku onegai shimasu. Just like the basic phrases, practice it more and more, it will become comfortable. If you don't practice and you just think about it, it makes it really worse in your head. So find a buddy, maybe somebody from school, or a friend that you may have if you're out of school, or you go to one of these meetups that we have, very comfortable, safe space for people. Try to practice and take it one baby step at a time. All right, my next tip is, I really think, to start slowly. I don't want you leaving this presentation be like, oh my gosh, there's just like, there's so many things I could do, and then you get overwhelmed and you don't do a single thing. I want you to start with just a baby step. So for example, I did drop my LinkedIn in the chat. I'll put it in there later when I'm done presenting. Try with me. I promise you I won't bite. You know that I'm nice. I promise you I'll be very kind to you. Send me a message and practice with me. And say, if you want to try practicing in Japanese, hajimemashite, Kasia-san. Great Lakes Jet Alumni Association no webinar, mimashita, arigatou gozaimasu. Something very simple. And I also dropped a link in the chat about how to personalize your LinkedIn messages, which I think is extremely important. But try doing that with anybody you can online. Try it with social media. And then maybe your next baby step could be like, all right, I'll sign up for some organizations and maybe get on their newsletters and find one online event I can join just as a participant. And you don't even have to talk. You just have to show up, and you're on the Zoom or whatever, and just have your name Kasia. And people will see, oh, there's this Kasia who's calling in, cool. And maybe you don't talk or ask questions, you're just there. That's the next big step. And just go slowly. Now, for people who are a little bit more outgoing, the things that I've been saying are probably like, yeah, I get it. But it really is nerve-wracking for so many people. And I don't want that to stop you from future success. Like, it is fun eventually when you challenge yourself all the time and you get to this point where you're like, okay, I can attend an event and talk to people. It takes time. So even for an introvert like me, it took a lot of practice. I still get nervous, but slow and steady, one thing at a time. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and give you an exact example of something to maybe help you out. All right. and then I'll start wrapping up. So Thursday, I did something that was a little bit kincho, a little bit nervous for me, but I'm going to share with you exactly what I did. I'm on the JBSD mailing list. I received an email in Japanese, and the only word in English there was cybersecurity. Like, oh, this is interesting. I know nothing about cybersecurity, but I'm like, let's take a look. I saw the date. You can see the numbers, so that's really easy to read. And you're like, wow, there's an event. It's in person, and they're going to have an English and a Japanese version. Cool. So there's even a flyer attached. I look at the flyer. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to join the Japanese one. Even though I know nothing about cybersecurity in English, how would I know what cybersecurity stuff in Japanese is going to be like? But you know what? I took my dictionary with me. And actually, I should back up a little bit. The event showed all the speakers. So I found the speakers on LinkedIn. And turns out I knew 2 people that were in the lineup that I met them in 2018 or 2019. So I reached out to them and I said, this is like weeks before the actual event. I followed up with them and I reminded them and said, hello, Kobayashi-san. I met you in 2019 at this event. You kind of want to be kind and remind them because it wasn't, they meet people all the time. So you want to nudge them and help them out. And by the way, I'm going to be at your event on this day, and I'm going to join the Japanese one. Even though I'm a little nervous, I really want to learn this and see what cybersecurity is about. He responded, we can't wait to see you. Thank you so much. Then I realized that there was a speaker on the Japanese panel speaking in Nihongo who was on the JET program. And I reached out to him on LinkedIn. I asked for a connection. I said, I saw you on the panel, and I am so happy that I saw a name in katakana presenting in Japanese. Wow, your Japanese must be so good for you to talk about this topic. I can't wait to see you. Sincerely, Kasia. We connected. He said, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you. So then I also researched the other speakers, kind of took a look at them, but didn't want to stalk them or anything. Just wanted to see who they are, what their background is. Okay, so I show up at the event, and my tip is I always show up early, because if you're going to an event with Japanese people, they show up early anyways, but I wanted to be a little bit early. And I was nervous walking in. I'm like, oh, who else is going to be here? But you know what? The 2 people that I reached out to before, one of them gave me a hug. Kasia-san, yokoso, thank you so much for coming. And I immediately felt so much better. And then he said, hey, do you know this person? I'm like, no, we just reached out on LinkedIn. He introduced me to this other Amerikajin who speaks Nihongo, and I talked with him for a bit, and it was so exciting. And then, so my nerves got a little bit calmed, and I'm like, okay, where can I sit? And I saw the other person that I had met previously a few years back, and she started talking to me, and she made me feel so welcome. And I asked her, where can I sit? She's like, you can sit anywhere. So this was like, I'm telling you a play-by-play, because I want you to know that the whole time I had butterflies in my stomach, but it was so helpful and kind of these people, and because I gave them a heads up, hey, I'm going to come here. And they welcomed me because they know what it's like to go to an event when they don't know a single person. The other thing is that at the uketsuke, the registration desk, there were 3 people there. And I didn't do this, but a tip you could also keep in mind is go to the organizers and maybe ask a question. Be like, hey, I'm new here. You know anybody I talk to? I just have a question. I just kind of want to know this. And then they'll take you over to somebody and you can talk with somebody, and it just makes you feel welcome. So, and then I stayed through the presentation with my Denshi Jiten, my little dictionary, listening to the words, and I had an hour and a half of amazing Nihongo no Obenkyo. When the event was done, they had a networking session at the end, so you could stay and talk with anybody you wanted. And I found that when I was by myself, the organizers would actually come up and be like, what's your name? Do you speak Japanese? And they're like, asking you questions. So it felt really welcoming. So I urge you to do that. I think if you find an event, you're freaked out as heck to do something. However, people are nice. They'll see you that you are nervous, and they might welcome you in. So a couple of tips I wrote down just to let you know. Like I said, research the event, see who's going to be there, reach out. Be also prepared in attire, professional attire, have your meishi with you. And to be approachable is something that is hard to explain, but don't just arrive and sit and, put your head down and don't look at people, kind of maybe be a wallflower and just kind of look around, be curious. It makes you nervous. It still makes me nervous, but try it. And also, finally, when you get back, follow up with the people that you met. Have that record to say, hey, in your, whether it's a LinkedIn or an email, it was so nice to meet you yesterday, because a lot of presenters and people, they meet hundreds of people at all these events. But if you share in your email, hello, Jim-san, we met at this event in 2019. Thank you so much for your time answering my question about XYZ. And then later on, maybe 2-3 years later, for me, it was 3 years later. If they didn't remember who I was, they could search in their email, in their emails and say, oh yeah, that's right. I did meet Kasia-san at this thing over here. We talked about this. That's right. And then you can kind of pick up where you last left off. So I gave a lot of examples and I ended a few minutes early, but I hope this was helpful. And I just want you to know, if there's anything to remember from this event, it's to be comfortable with where you are at. Don't be a college student thinking you have to be a shakaijin career person. Don't be an entry-level person thinking you have to be the super experienced person. Be comfortable where you're at. People are kind. They will help you. So, ご清聴ありがとうございました. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Kasia.
Yay.
And I'm so happy that you were able to join us for this event today. And yeah, so I'm gonna go through some of the questions that we're asking in the chat. Are you ready?
Let's do this.
Awesome, great. Okay, so what if we are based out of Japan? Do you have any tips or advice on how to make connections?
Yes, so if you're based out of Japan, for me personally, I'll give you some specific examples. I was really nervous to speak in Japanese in Japan. I was there when I was a little bit younger and I just didn't have the courage. So I found some local gaikokujin groups. So there was this few group, foreign executive women in Japan. And even though I was a student, I still was able to sign up and go and join these other non-native Japanese and native Japanese people. We all spoke in English, and I got to meet some friends that are now my lifelong friends. So that was very helpful. There's also like restaurants and things you can go to. Like if you're in Tokyo, there's the Pink Cow, and you go there and you're able to there's this nice, comfortable way to sit around this table, and you get to the people are always very kind. Hey, nice to see you. And do you know this person? They just came from, France. You should meet them. So there's a very welcoming environment to do that. If you would like to network in Japanese with Japanese people, I found it was very helpful to ask my coworkers to go out with them places and because I already knew my coworkers and I worked at a Japanese company. So they were very kind with me and they knew my language level. So I asked to go out with them to events, and they were just always introducing me to somebody, and always, I kind of felt like a very special gaikokujin because they were like, oh, this is Kasia-san, she's learning Japanese. And so it became very easy. So try to do a little bit of searching and see what's available near you. And always try to find maybe somebody can help you, like a little partner in crime or a mentor. Ask a question. They might be able to welcome you very kindly. So hope that helps.
I find that a lot of opportunities are posted on Facebook groups for opportunities in Japan. So that's also another tip. Okay,
absolutely.
Our next question. Yes. Is there a test to prove that someone can speak Japanese?
Well, I haven't really seen any tests that are understood or well known by companies as well as candidates. The JLPT, we know, tests reading, writing, and listening, but it's not necessarily business oriented. Then there's the BJT, the Business Japanese Test, that is available in most countries. You can take it at a Pearson Review Center. Those will test your listening with business Japanese, but also no spoken. I do have a list of other tests. I think they're out there, but they're not some that are famous that I keep top of mind. So it is hard to have that practice. So I think having like a language partner, or maybe hiring a tutor to help you with your Japanese language speaking, I think will be helpful. And yes, as Jennifer just wrote, Some companies will have their own tests, their own like skills, exercise, things that they can share with you that is very particular to that industry. So if I may make a quick mention, don't worry too much if you don't know the lingo of the companies you're applying at or the industries you're trying to network at, because sometimes they're so particular to that organization. It's not something you can actually study in school or before. So just go in with your own level and say that you're willing to learn.
Yes, great. Okay, for someone who has an N5 JLPT certificate but has been unable to take the JLPT because of the pandemic,
Yes.
what a good way, or what are great ways to sell their actual everyday use skills versus actually having an N3 paper?
And this actually applies to any JLPT level that you want to talk about. Honestly, a lot of times employers may not really know what N3 means or what N5 means or what N1 means. They just think, oh, everybody should have this or everybody should have that. So regardless of your level, I think it's important, this is a great question, to say what you can do. So also, side note, if you haven't been able to take the JLPT test because of the pandemic, you can also take the practice test and say, I've been taking the N whatever practice test, and you can get scored, you can score yourself on that and say that you are aiming to get it. So you may need to promote, support yourself when speaking with an employer to say, it's only offered once a year outside the US. It was canceled for this year and whatever. So be your best advocate for yourself, but also give examples in your cover letter. You can mention, even though I don't have the JLPT test, I lived in Japan for 5 years, and this is what I can do. I can communicate, I can welcome Japanese people in the United States because I know what it's like to live overseas. I can help with this task, or maybe my writing is better. So you talk about your writing strengths. There's many things you can cover, and I believe the cover letter is good for that.
Okay, thank you so much. So are there any specific tips for working professionals in the US that have been out of college for a few years but want to transition to a Japan-related job?
Yes. Oh, I love this question, because a lot of people who I speak to in this situation had this Japan dream a long time ago, and they never went for it because maybe there weren't so many jobs available. And it's like a part of you that's just kind of, it's like a dream that you just kind of hid away. But I want you to brush off the dust and bring it forward. I think there's a lot of opportunities now to work at global companies. And just recently on the job board, I have had a few job ads where Japanese is not required, but you should be mid-career in sales or this or that. And if you apply to those companies, you can say, hey, you want a mid-career sales professional. I am your person. And oh, by the way, I spent a year in Japan X number of years ago for study abroad. I relate very much with the Japanese culture. I'd be happy to use my skills, which are ABC, on the job. And also, I would love to, you want to also show that you're willing to learn on the job and say, if there's ever any Japanese related opportunities, I'm your person to learn and become that, become your future, whatever. So I think there's a lot of things you can do with that. So don't give up. And there's opportunities out there, but you have to be a proponent of your skills.
Okay, for someone who is interested in volunteer opportunities abroad, Japan specifically, what are some routes to find work, volunteer opportunities, or be abroad outside of school?
So let me confirm, are you thinking coming from abroad to Japan to do volunteer work? Is that what you think?
I believe this person is asking about, yes. So I just saw the comment, yes.
Okay, so it's a little bit difficult now to enter the country for jobs or related. If you can go as a tourist, and if you can get there and volunteer for organizations, absolutely. I think there are, you just have to do some searching. So for example, I know that there is a travel company, I think it's like japantravel.com or traveljapan.com. They have something called an internship, which you scroll at the very bottom at the footer, it says internships. So you're basically volunteering and they're helping you out. But if you are interested in writing, my understanding is, and things may have changed, so forgive me if I'm mistaken, they can send you to a local area. You volunteer there for writing about that local area in English. It gets posted on their website, and you do it only for a short amount because you can go there on a tourist visa. So I think other kind of volunteer organizations, maybe like a Red Cross type situation, I haven't looked into that. You might need to go to the actual organization's webpage and see if they have activity in Japan that you can go to. Otherwise, if you're searching in Nihongo, in Japanese, for some organizations that are in Japan, I think it would be best just to reach out to that organization. If you can write in Japanese, はじめまして、ボランティアしたいです。アメリカから来るんですけれども、どうですか? I'm coming from America. Is that possible? I mean, I think a lot of times these organizations are going to love you for you to volunteer. So this would be a great way for you to go there, save up the money, travel to Japan, volunteer, as well as see what the area is like. I think it would be amazing for your resume too.
Okay, great. So this is asked from a person who is moving back to Chicago after college. Do you know of any companies or organizations active in Chicago they can either connect with?
Yes, absolutely. I think your go-to, there's two, just look up the Consulate General of Japan in Chicago, first of all. Go to their links tab, which is up in the upper right-hand corner. They'll list a bunch of organizations, and there should be the Japan America Society listed there. Get on their mailing list. They have their newsletters are awesome. There's a lot of events. They've got book readings and all sorts of things. Check them out. And I think that would be very good. Chicago's huge. I mean, they even have Mitsuwa, where the most amazing grocery store with like a ramen shop inside it, and Kinokuniya bookstore. Oh, it's a dream to go there. Yes.
Okay. And for Meiji, should college students or recent college grads have one?
Always.
What are some information we should include on them?
Yes. So absolutely. I think it's very impressive if a student has a business card. I would just write on it. If it was me, if I was a junior in college, I would write my name, I'd write my email address, and maybe between my name and my email address, I would say Boston University student. And maybe I might even add a little, Boston Daigaku no gakusei or something, Zaigakuchu or something like that, to just add a little bit of Nihongo, because you also want you want to be memorable that you can speak Japanese as well too. So simple is best. If you want to find something fancy, right? I once had my kanji for my first name. I put together with a host family once, Kasia and kanji, and they had that. And it was always a conversation starter. They're like, oh, Kasia? Oh, kanji motteru desu ka? And then like that was great. So something like that I think would be great.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think there's a few more. For advice breaking into large companies like Sony and Honda, is there a straightforward way to break into those companies?
Oh, this is a good question. I'm going to first direct you to the US Japan Bridging Foundation. They have a series of webinars, and we actually just had one on Monday, and I was speaking, and the recording is available. The person I was speaking with, Heather, she talked about this because she works at Sony. There's also another, if you scroll down, there's like 20 webinars. We talked about job searching in Japan. Take a look at that one. There's something called the Shushoku Katsudo. If you want to actually work for a Japanese company in Japan, the Shushoku Katsudo is important to know about. It's actually the process to apply. But we also talked about applying for a company outside of Japan that's like a big company, and they might have their own process, because remember, it's competitive if you want to get into these bigger companies. So for the bigger ones, honestly, I would think that networking is really important. Get on those social media, see if they have events nearby you, see if any of those employees are speaking at certain events. So lots of things to do, but definitely go to that website. I'll try to put a link in the chat later.
Great. And let's just ask one more question. So for the Japanese culture industry, Twitter is probably main industry networking space. Do you know of any other industries that use a specific platform like that?
Can you read that one more time?
Yes, for the Japanese pulp culture industry, I'm thinking they're
Mhm.
referring to the translation or localization. Twitter is likely the main industry networking
Yep.
space. You know of some other industries that specifically use other certain platforms?
So I would agree. And I think Jennifer here can also probably comment on this because she's very good with manga translation. I mean, she's definitely the expert on that topic. I think that, yes, Twitter is very big for that, but I kind of want to think that Facebook is just seems to be what people use to network with each other afterwards. So it's less personal. It can be more business. And I think, yeah, I really think, if you want to find out for your particular industry, maybe do a Google search in not just English, but in Japanese and see what comes up. And maybe for your particular industry, Instagram is the way to go. Instagram is also really good with cultural related events because of the pictures and things. So I think that's a very my or generic way to respond to that question, but I hope it was helpful.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think I forgot one more.
Yes.
Does Ikigai Connections have any opportunities for Japanese related jobs in Massachusetts, or do you know of any other place to look for those?
Absolutely. I will add, let's see, I'll add it in the link.
Okay.
But so what I have is I usually have featured job ads, and then those are the ones that I specifically promote. I don't have Massachusetts ones now, but I have had Boston ones in the past. So I also offer a weekly newsletter if you want to check it out. It's all on my website, ikigaiconnections.com. And I think that there really are opportunities. If they're not on job boards, I really think that networking is the way that will help you, because sometimes you will hear about opportunities from networking that you do they don't make it to the job boards yet. That's why networking is so important. So find people in your area. Let's say you are outside of Boston, you're interested in pharmaceuticals. Find maybe there's some pharmaceutical companies that are related to Japan or are from Japan. Follow them on social. Maybe get on their newsletters if they have any, which companies don't usually do, and see if they offer any kind of speaking events. They have like their CEO is going to talk about something. Go to those events online, in person, and start to get to know those companies well.
Okay. We have time for a few more. So,
Sure.
okay. Let's see. Oh, there was another one about Meishi. Should we include our names in both English and katakana?
I think that would be a great idea because that shows that you speak Nihongo as well, or at least are learning it. So don't feel that you have to be pera pera to put it on there. Put it on there.
Okay. And we just want to be more clear on your online events page. Are you able to reread the logos you included on that page, please?
Sure. So I can share my slides so that this can be included in the recording if you want, but it was the US Japan Council. It was all kinds of Japan America societies. So the one I had was a logo for Georgia. We have one in Detroit. There's Chicago, all over. And also I had, I think those are the main ones.
Okay. All right, good. Does anyone have any other questions? Please type in the chat. Okay. Andrew, Kasia has never been on the JET program. Alicia, anybody who has been on the JET program or
Hi.
has Great Lakes AA can answer that question for you.
I will talk about that during the break if you want to ask me about the JET program. Okay. Kasia, I was wondering, could you talk a little bit more about the different levels of career and how your advice applies to, entry level, mid level, and more senior careers?
Perfect. Absolutely. Again, there's no rule that you have to be a certain language level or a certain number of years in Japan or a certain number of classes. But if we're just thinking about college graduate, so that would be entry level, right? You're just looking for your first job. I know it's frustrating out there. There's some jobs that say entry level, but need to have 1 year of experience, which drives me bonkers. But I still want people to apply to get experience. Your first job is most likely not going to be your dream job. And sometimes you just need experience. So it's, I know it's such a frustrating experience to look for jobs, but see what you can find, get work experience. At the same time, you're kind of figuring out what you want in your kokoro, what your career ikigai is. So maybe you take a job with like a logistics company and realize, I'm not into logistics, but at least you did that for a few years, you gained experience, you start writing emails in Japanese, or you start communicating, just, even writing emails in English is different in business too. So your entry level, that's going to be experimentation, trying and learning. Mid-career is kind of more, let's get a little bit more aligned with what I want to do. You start honing in on that like main industry, maybe the main job title you want to be a part of. And advanced, you're advancing more in what you like to do. And at that point, especially if you don't use Japanese skills, and what I was answering in the previous question, even if you're advanced and you're not using Japanese, but you want to find a job that finally uses the Japanese cultural or language skills, always that you can do absolutely anytime. So I hope that was kind of helpful. There's definitely a lot more I can dig into, but I know that we're at time. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be back from my little mountain escape on Tuesday, so I'll be able to get back to emails and LinkedIn messages then.
Thank you so much, Kasia. It was really
Yes.
great to hear your words of wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and good luck, everybody. Ganbatte kudasai.
Thank you. And we will put Kasia's slides up for you. So if you couldn't see them
Perfect.
clearly, you can take a look at that later. Enjoy the rest of your vacation, Kasia.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you to all the Great Lakes Jet AA board for having me here. So yes, we'll be talking about resume writing tips. A lot of these are applicable throughout like college, through post-college. I think a lot of the content I have today might be something you can think about in the future, where if you're coming back from JET, or, using your Japanese language skills or your involvement in Japanese clubs, for example, like how we want to incorporate that into a resume. Just a quick blurb about myself. My name is Judy Liu. I was on the JET program from 2016 to 2017, and specialized before in like education and history. And now I came back and I work in legal and compliance. And I also have experience working on executive resumes as well. Alrighty, and I'll have moments to stop within the presentation if anyone has questions throughout, or I'm sure that people are moderating the chat as well. So firstly, the importance of resumes. Alicia kind of touched on it just now, the importance of keeping our resumes updated. I mean, whenever something happens, write it down. I definitely recommend having a master resume. So every job that you apply to in your life is probably going to be looking for slightly different things. And a really important tip that I learned when I was younger is to cater your resume to that job description. So whatever that job description says they're looking for, like try to have similar words in there. Obviously, don't copy and paste it. Like that's not the right way to do it. But look at the key words that they're looking for and incorporate that into your resume to build it so that that recruiter sees that that's what they want. And so that's the importance of having a master resume where you can have everything you've done thrown in there, and it can be several pages long. But then when it comes to specific jobs you're applying to, you want to basically try to stick it to being one page unless you have 10 plus years of experience. I think that's the only situation I found where like 2 pages is acceptable, but you want to make it 1 page because it's a first impression for recruiters or for whoever is reviewing your resume. Sorry, go ahead.
We don't have the screen view you're looking for. We can see your whole screen. Just want to say that. So.
Oh yeah, that's totally fine. Is that okay with everyone?
If that's what you intended,
yeah, it's just easier for me to toggle. Okay. But is it big enough for everyone? Okay, great, thank you. But yeah, so recruiters are super busy. They are going through hundreds, if not thousands of resumes. And so you want your resume to pack a punch. And that's why we usually recommend 1-pagers. Now, the problem, and that's what makes it difficult, is how do you keep everything you do in 1 page, or how do you fill up 1 page, right? But that's the importance of resumes. It's a first impression, especially for cold applying. You want it to catch their attention because they're going through so many. And it's similar to what everyone was stating earlier on in like terms of like the interview for JET, for example. Like, you know, you want to stand out in your own way, and that's what your resume is for. Now, I will say when applying to jobs, it is highly recommended that you do have a contact or referral. So if you happen to know people, like, don't feel like ashamed or embarrassed to ask for that. Like, people get bonuses or from referring people. People are happy to help. So definitely use your connections or ask around and see who's willing to give you a referral, because that's just an easy way to get your foot in the door to get them to start like looking at your resume and considering you. Now, the third point I have here is that formatting is extremely important. We don't want to just content bomb your resume. We want it to be very clean and clear and crisp. And you might think like, well, isn't my content more important than like how it looks? Well, because recruiters are looking at so many resumes, you want it to look good. You want it to be clearly sectioned so it's easy for them to read. So when I say formatting, we're saying like, you know, have spacing, have like adequate spacing between different things, have lines to show like, this is my education, this is my experience, this is my activities. And we'll go through a few example resumes later as well. So that's the importance of resumes. Now we'll go into tips. These are some really quick tips on like really easy wins you can get on your resume. So we'll just go through each of them real quick. Font, please don't use Comic Sans or try to be creative. Use like curly cursives. It's not going to make it look pretty. It makes it hard to read and slightly unprofessional. So stick to things that are, you know, Times New Roman or just very clear like Calibri or Arial, just clear, clean fonts that make it easy to read. Formatting, like I mentioned a little earlier, we want to sectionalize it, and we'll talk about that a little later. Please name your file properly. First and last name usually, and we can go through that as well. But first, last name, resume is usually the way it is, just so that when a recruiter is looking at all these files in their folders, they see your name and they're like, okay, that's their resume. We want to PDF your resume whenever you do submit it in. Don't submit it as a Word doc or anything, because those are changeable or editable. You want it just in a PDF, and it's just a very proper document. It's almost like you're printing it and giving it to them. Another thing is when it comes to your resume and like your experience or your activities, you want to put it in reverse chronological order. And what that means is present at the very top, and then you go backwards. Now, as you gain more experience, you will have to drop like older stuff. So if you have something that you did 6 years ago, but you have like so many things you've done recently, that thing might be dropped. So for example, if you're in high school or college right now, you might have a lot of internships, definitely include that. But later on, as you build your career or, you know, take on more jobs, eventually those internships might drop off your resume just to keep it succinct and relevant. All right, now 3 to 5 bullets per position or role. Sometimes we do want to put as much as we can in there to show like all the things we did in the job. That's great, but you can talk about that in your interview. Because this is a quick look for recruiters, you want to hit like the biggest accomplishments that you had in that job. So it's generally recommended to have 3 to 5 bullets per position or role. I say position or role because perhaps you're in a company for several years and you keep, you know, climbing the ladder. Then that's a different role each time, and you can have 3 to 5 bullets per different role. Another tip is to quantify your experience, as in use numbers. You don't want to be too vague where you're like, helped clients do so-and-so, or translated documents between this person and that person. We want numbers to basically legitify it. So, you know, worked on 5 different projects, which covered like 50% of revenue or something like that. Obviously don't make up numbers, but use numbers to show recruiters the impact that you had in your job versus just like a vague sentence. Now, another thing is to use action verbs. If you don't know how to start your bullets under your role, start with an action verb. Things like developed, spearheaded, led, organized, executed, created, things like that to show like what you did in the job. And the last thing is also it's a very small detail, but it does make a difference in making your resume really professional, is to make sure your verb tenses are correct. What that means is if it's a past job that you're not at anymore, those words, those action words need to be in past tense, developed. But if it's a current job that you have right now, then it's in present tense, develop, whatever. So just make sure that the tenses are correct, and then make sure that it is consistent throughout your entire resume. Because when something is consistent, sometimes it can take recruiters out of it, and they're like, oh, this person isn't detail oriented. You want to make sure that your resume is pristine, because you have all the time in the world to edit it, and that's how recruiters are viewing it. Any questions on these tips so far?
Please ask any questions, and then I'll make sure to ask your questions to Judy at the end during
Perfect.
the Q&A.
Thanks, Lily. All righty, moving on. We have examples. So this is an example of how to quantify your experience with numbers. I know this is not everyone's an investment banker, but this is just an example. And we do have examples from anonymized examples from the wonderful board as well later that will be more salient to us. But for example, here, we're saying I'm an experienced investment banker and I worked on a number of mergers and acquisitions deals and collaborated with C-suite members. Okay, like as a recruiter, you'd be like, well, great, like don't really know what that means. So you add in a little more background, 10 plus years of experience, worked on and closed 20 plus like sell and buy side M&A deals worth about however many billions of dollars. So you see how they like incorporated numbers in there. You can say, they wrote coaching experience first, but you can quantify that by saying mentored over 10 new analysts and associates, right? So that's where you kind of get your numbers from. So sometimes it might be hard for you to think of numbers, right? Like coaching experience, who would have thought there could be numbers there? But sometimes you just got to be a little more creative and think about, okay, where can I incorporate numbers? And that's a place that you can do it. Let's see. These are now example bullets, just to show you, I guess, the tips that we mentioned earlier in practice. So you see these verbs like assisted and supported. Those are good verbs to have. You see, we have numbers here, successful 3.5 billion acquisition. If we're not working with money, of course, you can say like worked on 10 full cycles, or worked on 10 projects, or worked with 7 teams, something like that. Assisted is also great as well. I know we usually have less responsibility, entry level, or in internships. So even if it's not like this amazing verb, like created or executed or led, assisted is totally fine. Interacted with is totally fine as well. These are just some examples for you to think about. Do not undersell yourself, right? Like all these things are things that you did in your job. Other example bullets for people maybe a little more middle level in their careers, managed something. This person is obviously some sort of social media person, and they're saying they manage all these profiles with a following of 50,000, right? Like think about how to incorporate the numbers that work for your job in here. This person did some website stuff, planned website development, and then increased web traffic by 27%. Hopefully that kind of clears some or provides a little more context on how to add numbers into your resume. Now we're going to get to how to incorporate your Japanese experience. Definitely have a skills or a language section. I mean, it's the most relevant to this section. And we'll go through a resume later as well on like what you want to order your sections in. I will say usually skills or language is near the bottom because you want the top to be like education in your relevant experience or relevant activities or extracurricular activities, and then you have skills. I've seen people put language in skills as well, but you want a skills section or something because honestly, it's a really great place to show maybe what programs you're used to working with, what languages you're used to working with, what your interests are. It's a great way to add more character to your resume. Other than that, describe your fluency skills briefly, as in like probably in one word. Don't just say Japanese, right? Say like intermediate, fluent, native speaker, native proficiency, just so that people are aware. Yeah. Now, do you have a certification, right? The JLPT. If you do, definitely put that on. And you can put that on, in this case, some people have a certifications section if you have multiple certifications. If you only have one certification like this one, then you can fold it into your skill section for sure. You can say JLPT, like whatever, certified. And that shows, that indicates your language proficiency. Now, if you're in a club, a Japanese club, or some sort of social club or language culture club, how do we incorporate that into your resume? You can definitely do that. I mean, if you have a position, great, list that position, talk about it, and ask for what you did in there to indicate how you could be useful to this job that you're applying to. You know, did you organize an event? Did you manage a budget or finances? Did you connect people together? Or how many members are in the club, right? How many people did you help? Think about those things that you did, and those are definitely all legitimate things to put in there. Now, if you went to Japan or you were on the JET program, think about, you know, how were you involved in the cultural exchange? How many schools did you work with? How many students did you work with? Did you make your own curriculum? If you didn't, don't worry about that. Leave that off, right? Like, think about things that you did and put that in there. Volunteering as well, right? Like if there's a Japan Fest or something in your city and you volunteer, great way to put that on too, to show your involvement, as well as that you're a responsible person who, you know, does things. So what did you do at the event? So those are ideas on how to incorporate your Japanese experience into your resume and beef it up. Now we're going to go through a few resumes real quick. Let's go to, for example, let's do this one. So usually a resume is formatted so that you have your name, you want your address and contact information because they need to be able to contact you. So this resume—
Just a minute,
oh, yes.
Judy, I can't see the resume.
Oh, hold on a second. Thank you for telling me that. Let's do this one. Okay, do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. But yeah, so you want your name at the top, address, contact information. And then you see this resume is a great example of sectionalizing. I could zoom out and you can see how like there are chunks, and you want your resume to be chunked. You don't want just like a long page of text because then they don't know where to start. So here you see objective, work experience. Now for objective, I've heard both sides. Some people like it. Some people say you don't need it. So that's up to you. Like your resume at the end of the day is you. So this is up to you to decide if you want to put it on or not. Objective is a great way to put down like why you're attracted to that specific job. And this is a great example of objective. Some people's objectives are very long. You don't want that because that takes up space from the rest of your experience. This is just like a one-liner, two-liner. It's a great objective. So work experience or relevant experience, you know, if you're a student, you can say relevant experience, something of the sort. And you see how they've sectioned it where the headers are bold, right? This is a very clean font. Bold your section titles so that the recruiter knows where they're looking. Then for each position, they've underlined it. See how formatting is really important, right? Take advantage of the bolding and the underlining and also spacing to indicate to recruiters where to look. So they've underlined their position title, and then you put, you know, where everything was, the chronological order, right? The most recent, and then it goes to older. There are multiple bullets here, as you can see. The tenses are correct as well, right? Conduct, collect, analyze. And then for the older jobs, like down here, all in past tense, coordinated, negotiated. You can see that they've quantified it right here, like over 1,000 like Japanese right there. So this is a good example of a lot of good things that we talked about. And you see how they have spacing too between each position. That's also important. If you don't have enough space, you can make the space a little smaller, but it's important to have spacing so that it's easy for people to read it. You see, for if you were on, you know, JET or you're some sort of teacher here, a great way to quantify what you did there is, look, 16 English classes, taught 16 classes there. You know, any place you can add numbers, add numbers. So for this person, their education is lower at the bottom. So this is going to be different for all of you guys on here. And this is up to you guys to decide. But basically, if you have a lot of work experience, I would say maybe at least like 4 to 5 years, education starts moving to the bottom, because at the end of the day, your work experience is more important and more relevant. But if you are a college student or you're going for your first job, education goes at the really top because that is the most recent thing that you did. So where the education goes depends on kind of where you are in life. But there's that. GPA, you can include it if it's really high. If it's not, don't include it. The resume is what you want it to be. So this person has a skills section, right? They talked about, you know, what they're good at, MS Word, MS PowerPoint and stuff. If you don't have enough space, you can definitely just say MS Word, MS Excel, and MS Office, and you don't have to add in like extensive experience, for example, because you're as under the skills section, you're already saying like, I am skilled in these things. Right here, they talked about how they're proficient in reading, listening, and writing in Japanese language. That's a way to put it in there. And then they also have a section on volunteer activities and what they do in this volunteering activity. Now, I will say this one has a references, and I know some people have questions on references. You don't need to include references on your resume because at the end of the day, if they need a reference, they will ask you. They won't just like look at your resume and reach out. They will reach out to you first and say, we're interested. Please provide a reference if we'd like one. So you can leave references off and that saves you some space. So this resume is a really great example. I will say that we could condense it to be 1 page versus 2 pages. So that's one example. Let me go ahead and pull another example for you guys. Real quick. Okay, and I think this is the last same example we can go through before we go into Q&A. I know there was a lot we had to throw in here. But yeah, so this is also a really great example. Name at the really top, so we know who we're talking about. You have a location, your phone number and email. Once again, really important. You can include your LinkedIn if you want, but you don't have to. This person went ahead and wrote just what their identity is. They're an editor. So it makes sense for them in their industry, but you don't have to do it, right? In your case, it could be education at the really top or work experience at the really top. I mean, the way they've sectioned it is also really nice where it's like a big block, but if you don't have enough space, you can definitely get rid of the block and move things around. Core competencies and technical skills, they put up at the top. Usually I see it at the bottom, but it depends on the industry. So maybe for them, it's really important to show like, hey, I know how to do these things. So it depends on your industry. Now we go to professional experience. You see it once again, they've done sectioning, bullets, there's spaces in between. They bold what their title is, and they talk about like who they've worked for, right? All these verbs, perform, review. I will say in this one, we could definitely add in a little more numbers. So for example, here it says perform editorial duties, including editing manuscripts, proofs, and printer materials. Well, how many? That's hard to quantify because that's your job. Okay, well then how many per month, right? You know, editing about or approximately like 10 manuscripts per month or proofs or something like that. Think about how to incorporate that in. Manage project schedules. How many project schedules? Here it is, 4 manga novels per month. I do recommend, so I know in normal writing or grammar, we don't put in like the numerical numbers unless it's like a double digit. So that's why they wrote 4. But I think in terms of a resume, because it's a quick look, if there's a number like 4, go ahead and put the numerical 4 in so that it calls out that there's a number there. You know, write back cover copy and sales text, how many per month, how many per year, was there a big project that they worked on? So these are different ways to add more and bulk up your resume. Let me go ahead and go back to the presentation. All right, yeah, an example section for your education. And this is also another example of just a sectioned resume and what it should look like and the order that it should be in, typically, just to lead the recruiter through your resume. And then I also have resources at the end. There's like pages, and you could Google search too, like resume verbs to use or example resume formats if you want to update your format as well. For me, I've done it where I have 2 different formats and I kind of sent 2 different formats to different places depending on what I felt the job was or what the company's personality is. So it depends on the job that you're applying to. So always keep that in mind to get higher success rates of callback. All right.
Okay, let's move on to the Q&A. Lily, please.
Hey, Judy. Okay, so we have a few questions from the chat. Where can we find sort of numbers to quantify a resume? I know you covered that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, numbers are hard to find. Obviously, if you're in a job that works with numbers, or if you're like the treasurer or something, those are easy numbers to find. But otherwise, you do need to be a little creative about even like the soft skills stuff. So if you're organizing an event, how many people were involved in that event? How many people are in your club? If you work on like a big project that dealt with like you're doing an experiment and deals with like certain population, can you be like, oh, worked on this project that deals with like however many populations, for example. If you think your job is just not very quantifiable, but you work with other teams, you can say like did this and this and worked with 5 other teams, for example. Hopefully that helps.
Yes, there was another one that was a bit more specific. If this person works at a food service, so what are some examples that they could, where could they find those numbers? Like
That's a really, really great question. I would not say tips, but I think the food service job is a very difficult job, and how you can quantify that is how many hours did you work each night or each day at these different places? If you have several food service jobs, how many did you cover? How many roles? How many people do you usually serve? Like, maybe you don't serve it, but like the restaurant, for example, like how many head count does the restaurant usually get per night? You can roll that in, right? Did this, and this, with the usual like night turnout of however many people, just to show how many people that come in and you interact with.
So how do we keep our resume to 1 page while keeping enough keywords to have a high enough ATS score to have my resume seen by a human?
That's a really great question. And that's a struggle for everyone. Well, first I will say, if you do have 10 plus years of experience, 2 pages should be fine. But if not, you just got to look through the job description and pull the keywords. So they usually have like a basic requirements and then preferred requirements. So I would try to pull keywords from both just to get some of both. I will say I don't encourage it, but I have heard and I've seen online like people put in words in white font, but I don't know how that works.
Okay. When you say cut off older positions, do you completely leave off the positions totally or list them without specific bullet points?
That's an excellent question. So sometimes if you've done like a bunch of internships and stuff, and now you're like several years down the line and doing some other career that's completely unrelated, like maybe you worked at a medical lab, but now you're doing like, I don't know, Japanese stuff. You can leave that off if it's been so many years. But if it's relevant, so like if you like volunteered at a Japanese club, like ran it, was a president and all that stuff, and your current career is related, you can definitely list it, but with no bullets.
Great point. So there's a lot of resume templates online that include tons of colors. Should I default to black and white, or is it more appropriate for applying to some jobs with color in your resume?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know I've said this before and doesn't sound helpful, but it does depend on the job or the industry that you're applying to. If you are applying to some sort of design job or something, maybe they do like colors. Like go to their website and figure out like what their aesthetic is. If you're applying to some sort of government translation interpretation job or some sort of executive assistant job, they probably want something black and white and the color is distracting. So it depends on the role. So I say research your industry and then research that company to get a feel for what their aesthetic is. I will say if you want to err on the safe side, black and white is always good.
Okay, so I have a question for you. So I mentioned that you have sent different resume formats to different positions. So when do you know what kind of format to use for what position? Because I've always used the same format.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So what kind of format to use for different positions depends on your experience, as well as the company. So when I say your experience, that's on where do I want to put like different sections? So if you're fresh out of college or you're in entry-level jobs, you do want your education first at the top, and then relevant experiences, and then maybe something like activities or extracurriculars, like something like that. Now, as you get more experience in your career, the education moves further down. Top is your relevant experience, and then maybe you add in a skills section, for example. Now, in terms of I've seen horizontal formatting, I've seen vertical formatting, where there's one side that has blurbs on their skills and stuff. The other side lists all the experience. That depends on industry, but also depends on the real estate on your piece of paper. If you can't afford to have a whole left side taken up by this column, then do it. But if you can't, because that is a lot of empty space, take away that column and go horizontal instead. And then also depends on the industry and the job. If it's some sort of more creative job, maybe a more creative resume, but you have to be careful with that because you want the resume to be readable as well. You don't want to go wild with it and go really creative, but something a little more eye-catching or a little different from just Times New Roman could be the way to go. I will say I've experimented with kind of a more column format and a horizontal format, and they've both done well. And then I've also experimented with two different types of fonts, sans serif and serif. Serif as in the font, they're two different groups of fonts. Serif means it has these little feet, like Times New Roman, and sans serif means no little feet. I know it's a little complicated, so if this is over your head, don't worry about it. But these different types of clean font also have done equally well, but it depends. If you're applying to a bank, maybe do Times New Roman. If you're applying to a newer company, do Calibri or something. So depends on all those factors.
That's a great point. Okay, we have a question about the JLPT certification. So should they put in the year that they received it? Should they include serial number?
Great question. Sure, those are important, but honestly not really important on your resume. It's either you have it or you don't, and they're not going to cross-check, let me look up their serial number. They don't have time for that. So you can definitely just put down JLPT, whatever level, and you don't have to put the year. Now, if in your skills section you are putting years that you got different certifications, then yes, go ahead and include your year.
Okay, great, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? Please ask in the chat.
Great. And if anyone has questions after this as well, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn and just send me a message or whatever, totally fine.
Judy, can you please link your LinkedIn in the chat later, maybe?
Yes, I can do that.
Great. Anything else? Does anyone else have a question? Oh. Okay, so if somebody's resume is technically computer science oriented, should they include any about Japanese?
You know what? That's a really great question. If you have space for it, I do highly recommend you add it in, because even though it might seem irrelevant, right, to computer science, if you include it at the bottom section under skills or interests or something, I've seen people have an interest section, it adds personality to your resume. So, obviously when you're applying to your job, I assume everyone's a computer science person. So they might all have very similar things. But if you have an extra little section, it just adds a little bit of color, and maybe the recruiter's oh, this person does something else. So I do highly recommend it. Just don't have it take up a bunch of space, right? Because it's not the most important thing.
Oh, this person actually, in the Japanese resume, should they include computer science information?
Oh, I think it depends on what that computer science information is. If they're experienced in some different languages, Python, whatever it is, you can include that in the skills section, because it does make you stand out. It shows that you have other skills as well. So I think the same as what I said before, just flipped, where it's a great way to add a little more personality. Just make sure it doesn't take up too much space because it is not the most relevant.
Okay, great. And we are out of time for Judy's section. There is more time for a breakout room Q&A.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me and best of luck to everyone.